Hey YouTube, Case Against Faith here. Haven't seen you guys in a long time and decided to do a video. I used to have on my channel my Road to Atheism series. I've taken down that original video and I decided I wanted to put it back up. But I've decided to go ahead and re-record it from scratch. I hope my story is of interest to some people. Maybe some people will find it boring, but I hope at least some people will find my story about how I got to my current perspective to be of interest. If you've seen me on YouTube for very long, you probably know I have the persona of being, the hard-ass skeptic. You better show me the evidence if you want me to believe anything. I mean, I'm all about evidence and all about skepticism. Well, that was definitely not how I was. As a kid, I was quite gullible. In fact, perhaps my current persona is a bit of a uh, kind of like feeling like I've been tricked so many times. I'm now going to be the absolute opposite of what I was, because like I said, I was pretty gullible. Just as for an example, like I read The Secret Life of Plants, which was a book which claimed that plants had feelings. I read The Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey, which I'm going to talk about in more detail a little bit later. I read Chariots of the Gods, the guy who said that the pyramids were made by aliens, space aliens. I had a astrology period, which at first I was going to go into more detail, but I decided it's not worth the time. Just to suffice it to say that I was more open to woo-woo, so to speak, when I was a kid. And in general, I did not know skepticism, how to evaluate whether something was true or false. I was very, very poor at that, so I was pretty gullible. Now, as far as religion, as in my household, that was kind of strange to me. My parents, if you asked them, like my mother, she was raised Lutheran, and if you asked her what her religion was, she would say she was a Lutheran. If you asked my father, he would generally say he was a Protestant. I was baptized, I believe, as a Lutheran, I believe. But we never went to church. Not Christmas, not Easter. We never went to church. But yet, my father would, on occasion, give these religious talks. He would say, "We got to get some religion into you, boy," and talk a little bit about religion. Thinking back at it, I wonder how much of it he believed himself. Maybe it was one of those things that he thought that people should believe. I honestly don't really know, because it was such a relatively rare. I mean, I'm talking like once or twice a year, maybe something like that. At least that I can remember. But I always found these talks very scary, because religion was something very, very frightening to me. I don't know where all I got the influences of the heaven and hell and whether you're going to be damned for all eternity from. Maybe it was from some of these talks of my father. Maybe I got it from somewhere else. I don't really know. But I developed a pretty strong fear that maybe I was going to be one of the ones going to hell at a fairly young age, like in elementary school. I was kind of afraid that might be the case. And so anytime that religion would be brought up to me, it would be kind of frightening, because it would bring up these fears about whether I was going to heaven and hell. So I really didn't want to hear my father talking about religion. And I was very, very happy that it didn't happen very often. But strangely, there was one thing that he talked about. He talked about an event that would someday happen where Christians would go straight to heaven without ever dying. Basically, the rapture. He didn't use that word, at least I don't think so. And I'm talking like late 60s, 70s, early to mid 70s. This is the time frame we're talking about. And I didn't think that was very popular yet, rapture theology, at least not that I know of. So I don't even know exactly where all he got that idea from. But the bottom line is, my first introduction to the concept of a day when Christians were going to be whisked off to heaven directly did come from one of my father's religious talks. So as far as, friends and other things, I had some friends in elementary school that were kind of Bible thumpers. I don't remember them very well. So I'm going to now skip more forward to high school, which I remember a lot more detail. And in high school, I definitely had a number of friends who were pretty strong Bible thumpers. Like there was this one guy, his name was Jim. He was a good friend of mine. He was a really kind, nice guy, really good. The epitome of what a Christian is supposed to be. You know, but yet, one thing that was a little bit funny was he did kind of look like a little bit of a tough guy. I mean, he was in high school, but he had a beard and mustache, and he wore a leather motorcycle jacket, and if you didn't know him, he kind of looked like another kind of tough guy. Except one time I saw him, for some reason he was riding his sister's bike, and his sister's bike had one of those little girly baskets in the front, and he had his pet poodle in the basket. So imagine this guy that you might think just belongs on a motorcycle riding his girl's bike with a poodle in the basket. So I remember that, laughing pretty good at that particular scene. So the bottom line was, I in general had a really good thoughts about Christians. I mean, I liked Christians. In fact, they were like, the people that I knew were like Jim, that they were really good, warm, kind people. And so in that sense, I had a lot of envy because, they also knew where they were going. They didn't have worries about what they were going to heaven and hell. So I was jealous of them for having that confidence and inner peace, at least as I saw it at the time. But again, I had this, I just didn't know how to believe this stuff. I sometimes read a little bit of the Bible. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. And so I had this kind of love-hate relationship, sort of. Like I had some things I liked about it. I saw examples of good Christians, and I liked them. And the idea of being able to live in heaven and eternity and happiness and never having any problems, that had a lot of appeal to me. But, I mean, to actually know how to feel it and believe it, I just didn't really know how to do that. So now, let me get to another interesting subject, at least for me. The Aerosmith song, "High School Loser Never Made It with the Ladies." Well, they were singing about me. I was their inspiration. At least that's what I felt like for the first couple of years of high school. My junior year of high school was very, very interesting. I had this. I was in a pre-calculus class, and this teacher had this annoying thing where she insisted we sit alphabetically, which at first I was very annoyed about because I wanted to sit next to people I knew, and there was this girl that I didn't know and happened to be alphabetically next to me, and not that I had anything against her, but I just wanted to sit next to my buddies, and I was annoyed. But very, very quickly I found out this girl was just magical. I mean, I just fell head over heels in love with this girl. I mean, unbelievable. We couldn't stop thinking about this girl day and night. And she liked me. We went out. We started having dates. We went to movies. We went to concerts. Like my second major rock concert was Supertramp Breakfast in America tour, and I took my girlfriend to that. So that's pretty exciting for the high school loser to have a girlfriend to go to a major concert with. That was really major cool. Now, one thing about her is that she was a good Catholic girl. Her parents were from Puerto Rico and from Spain, and she actually spent a lot of her life growing up in Puerto Rico and Spain, and she spoke Spanish. She spoke English quite well, but her native language was actually Spanish. And she was a good Catholic girl. She and her parents went to Mass every Sunday, and she even said that when she was a little girl, she thought about being a nun, but she didn't want to do that anymore. I don't really remember exactly what all I told her about my religion. I know that I didn't really relate to it, so I vaguely remember not wanting to discuss it too much, but I can't remember exactly what I told her. Now, like I said, we were going out with her, we're having dates, and she likes me. and we spend a lot of time together. We have a lot of great time together. But she doesn't really seem to have the same depth of feeling for me as I do for her, which really, really hurt me. It was really, really hurt a lot. I mean, like we would be talking about our plans for the future. I mean, she was a year older than me. She was a senior, and so she was going to be going to college soon, and I would be going to college in 2 years. So we're getting close to adults, and she's not saying things along the lines of, "Well, let's go to college together. Let's make our plans for the future." You know, she didn't. The way she talked, she didn't seem like she had a thoughts of planning a future together. And so this really gave me lots and lots of pain. Now, since she was a year older than me, she invited me to her senior prom, which again was pretty magical to me. The high school loser having a senior girl asking me out to a prom. I mean, that's pretty heavy duty stuff for me, anyways. And I tried to tell her that, you know, it was kind of hard for me to talk to her about these feelings that I was having. But I mean, she was going to be going to college soon, and I needed to tell her, look, I mean, I've been really in love with you. And she said it was nice and all that, but she said she wasn't really thinking like that yet. So we lived in Houston area, and she was going to go to the University of Texas. So she went there for her first year of college. And I would see her sometimes on the weekends and whatnot, on occasion. But she was pretty busy with school, so I didn't really see her very much during my senior year, just occasionally. I did invite her to my senior prom. And again, this is pretty cool. I got a 2-year running girlfriend that I had taken to 2 senior proms. Not bad for the high school loser. And so, you know, I'm trying to think about, you know, are we going to have a future together? And she's still not really coming like that's really in her plans, in her thinking, at least not yet. And I would have happily gone to University of Texas, you know, if she would have felt like she was wanting to develop a future together. I would have happily gone there. But since she wasn't talking like that, and since I lived in Houston and it was a lot more convenient for me just to go to University of Houston, I decided that, at least for my first year or whatever, I'm going to just go to the University of Houston. Maybe things will change, and maybe I'll change schools, maybe she will. I don't really know what's going to happen, but this is what's convenient for me. Start here at the University of Houston. And I decide intentionally to pull back. I'm not going to be calling her so often. In fact, I'm tired of being the one to call her all the time. I'm always the one that's calling her. She seems to never be the one that's calling me. So I intentionally say, I'm just not going to call her. Please, will she call me? I don't remember how long, but a number of months passed by. And I'm getting both angry and frustrated because, I mean, we had all this great time together. I mean, she was my girlfriend for 2 years, and she doesn't call me once in months. And I wasn't even going to call her, but after quite a while, I decided I better go ahead and call her. Maybe she's just waiting on me. Maybe she thinks I'm mad at her, and she's just waiting on me. I don't know. So I try to give her a call, and she's withdrawn from the University of Texas. This seems quite strange to me. So I call her parents' house, and the phone's been disconnected. So I drive to her parents' house, and the house has been sold. Somebody new lives there, and the people that live there don't know what's happened to the old family. This is really odd. Well, go to the post office, you get a forwarding address. They left no forwarding address. What the? I mean, I couldn't believe my eyes or what I was seeing. Who withdraws from the university, family disappears, don't even leave a forwarding address. She doesn't even call me. I mean, I dated her for 2 years and she doesn't even call me? I mean, are they in the mafia? Are they in some part of the Spanish Puerto Rican mafia? Maybe there's some witness protection program. I don't know. All I know is this is the craziest damn thing I've ever heard. No forwarding address gone. Well, that was pretty dang frustrating. But otherwise, my college is going fairly well. I'm actually enjoying very much being a college student because when I was in school, I was the loser. I mean, I was the geek, the nerd. Wasn't the football jock or anything. But in college, we're all, young adults, preparing for our lives, and we've got we're students because we want to be students. We're wanting to learn, and so this was a pretty cool environment for me. Otherwise, so while I'm extremely despondent about this weird situation with my girlfriend, otherwise life is going pretty good. I mean, going to college, doing okay, not bad. Then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I got hit with this sudden deep depression. Still don't know why it hit me like this because it was so suddenly and so strangely. And I also had OCD. Most people tend to think of obsessive compulsive disorder. Most people think of OCD as like hand washing and not wanting to touch doorknobs like Howard Hughes. And that is, of course, a very, very common form of OCD. That's not the form of OCD I had. The form of OCD I had was his obsessions of self-harm. Having thoughts of wanting to cut myself. I mean, I'd have thoughts about cutting up my nose with wire clippers and weird, jumping, driving my car off of bridges and jumping off of cliffs and, suicidal and self-harm thoughts. I never acted out on any of these, but they were things that I could not get out of my head. It wasn't like, to me, it was almost like a physical feeling, not an emotional feeling, in the sense because it was so dark and that you couldn't leave it. I mean, it wasn't like it would go away if I would distract myself watching TV. It would always be there. This feeling would always be there. So I went to some, psychiatrists, and in the, this is, 81, 82, that era. It seems like at least the ones I went to didn't really know how to diagnose OCD very well. The first thing I was put on was an antipsychotic Thorazine, which, made me sleep a lot, but didn't do anything for my mental issues. I left that doc, went to another one, and she put me on an antidepressant called Desiril. She thought that was supposed to be the best thing for OCD. That's what she thought. So she put me on this Desiril, and it didn't do jack for me. It didn't do nothing. It didn't help me a bit. It did help me sleep, but that was about it. So mental health, at least as far as I can see, mental health professionals can't do jack for me. At least that's what the impression I'm getting. So maybe this is God's way of saying, hey, look, you need to decide what you believe. I always had this love-hate relationship where I kind of wish I was a Christian, but didn't know how to believe it. So I decided to start going to church. I hadn't mentioned this part, but some buddies, went to a Methodist church, and they'd first started to get me to go to just a singles group, which really wasn't the church singles group. It really didn't have much to do with religion. Sometimes the speakers would talk a little bit about religion, but generally speaking, it was just a social. It had very little to do with religion. So I was okay with that. And, I, in general, I thought I wanted a good Christian girl, or at least somebody with kind morals. That was kind of my thought. I wanted a quote-unquote good girl. So I was happy going to a singles group. And so now I've decided, well, I'm going to try actually going to church. It was a Methodist church that my friends had introduced me to. So I'm trying to, so I'm trying to read the Bible again, and it still just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I tried doing, the so-called sinner's prayer, asking Jesus into my heart. I'm a sinner. Please come into my heart. And Christians always told me that, God would reveal Himself to you if you were sincere. And I was as sincere as I knew how to be. But yes, I still had doubts. So I used the term a catch-22 because that's what religion seemed like to me. It seemed like that, well, maybe Christians were right, that if you really, really, really believed already, then God would show Himself to you. But how could you really fully, fully believe without first getting something back from God to give you reason to believe? So that was the catch-22. How could you believe enough without God telling you, if God won't tell you until you believe? But yet I tried. I tried to do the sinner's prayer. I tried reading the Bible. I tried going to church on Sundays. Now, this girl I talked about. Before we go a little farther, I want to remember something. Is that I considered her almost a genius. I mean, I was taking math and science curriculum because I was planning on going into engineering. So in my high school, I was taking physics and calculus and that kind of stuff. She was too. She was a year behind me. I guess her schools and what country she went to when she was younger didn't have quite the same curriculum. So as a senior, she was taking some of the same classes I was as a junior, physics and pre-calculus. But she got better grades than me. I considered her, really, really smart. Smarter than me, at least as far as I was concerned. So, and I'd been off and on trying to reach friends of hers, seeing if I could find somebody that knew what the heck happened to her. Finally, it happened to be during this period of deep depression that one of these leads panned out. And I find her. Turns out that she had been a Mooney, the Unification Church, which was very strange to me because, like I said, I would have thought of only not very bright people would have been caught up in something like that. I didn't know much about them, but I knew that the reputation of them as being a cult and quote-unquote brainwashing. And so she tells me the story about that when she got into the Unification Church, that her parents actually had her kidnapped and sent to a deprogramming school. And in this deprogramming school, they would make her do things that were quote-unquote normal, like drinking and smoking. And she said that before she became a Mooney, she didn't drink or smoke, and so those things were never normal for her. And so they were making her do quote-unquote normal things that were abnormal for her. And that they made her sign some paper saying that she disavowed the Unification Church and blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, she signed it because she had to sign it or she wasn't going to get out of that place. So she signed it. And then she broke off contact with her parents because of what they had done to her. And that apparently the reason why her parents moved without leaving a forwarding address had to do with trying to avoid the Unification Church, something along those effects. So that was why they seemed to disappear off the face of the earth. And so she told me, well, go ahead and come to my church. And, well, at this point, like I said, I'm trying to become a Christian, trying to learn, trying to go to church. Not so sure about this Mooney stuff. I've heard that they were called, but at this point, something's got. I don't know what's wrong with me. Something's really, really wrong with me on this depression thing, this OCD. Something's really, really. And even if they are called, if they could figure out a way to take this away from me, I would join. I'd sign. If they had a cure for this, I would sign my name on the dotted line, instantly. Or if I would somehow get my girl for the rest of my life, I would have signed on the dotted line. That would be fine too. So I say, well, I'm not so sure about this Mooney stuff, but what the heck, I'm going to go. So I went to the church one night, and Honestly, no big deal, really. I mean, they didn't get out, getting sleepy. They didn't hypnotize me or anything. They had like a little Bible study of some sort, and I'm sure it had some of their own spin to it, but it didn't seem all that different or weird or crazy to me. And uh, whatever. I mean, it didn't make me go, yeah, I really want to join this thing, but I didn't feel like I was being pressured or brainwashed or anything. So, anyways, the girl tells me that, well, she would be happy if I joined her church, but don't think that means that we're going to be together. She's already been in the church a couple of years now, and she's got her own ministry, and she's got her own missions from Reverend Moon, and I would be just joining, and I probably wouldn't even ever hardly see her. So, given that I was basically being offered nothing that I wanted, I wasn't being offered my girl, and I wasn't being offered the church didn't seem to be doing any great things for me, emotionally. So I said, well, I really just don't think this is for me. So she said, well, maybe someday I'll change my mind, but that she has a ministry to do, and she doesn't even stay in Houston very much because of, that was where she was from, and, she thinks her parents might still have watches on the Houston church. So she doesn't even want to be at the Houston church very much, and so she was going to be leaving in the next day or so, and if I wasn't joining, or even if I was, it was basically goodbye, at least for the foreseeable future. So I said goodbye. I actually did want to see her about 10 years later, and in the early 90s, and she was still a Mooney, believe it or not, but I'm not going to go into those details. That's another weird story. But. So now like I said, at this point, I've been having this depression for, over a year, maybe close to 2 years. I'm not exactly sure. But it was really, really bad for me. If you've never had anything like this where you just can't stop feeling these weird thoughts, you just really can't know how hard it was. So the doctor who had me on Deseril finally concludes, well, this just doesn't seem to be working for this guy. So she puts me on a different medication. It was this is still the early 80s. They don't have any of the good drugs that they got today, but they did have a tricyclic that this one seemed to work amazingly well for me. It was the closest thing to a miracle I'd ever seen. I started taking the tricyclic antidepressants, and the obsessions were gone, the depression was gone. Which was certainly had a lot of impact on me, because I've been trying to go to church and just asking Jesus into my heart didn't seem to do anything for me. The Unification Church didn't do anything for me either, not to mention it. But taking this little pill, just a few milligrams a day, and my whole thinking is different. Makes it hard to imagine a room for a soul if just taking a few milligrams of some chemical a day changes your whole outlook on life. So I wasn't yet willing to say I was an atheist, but I was definitely stopped bothering to go to the church. That was doing me nothing. I did keep going to the singles group, but I stopped going to services. And I figured, well, God did nothing. Medicine, once I finally got the right one, does something. Seemed to be pretty strong evidence against praying for God doing much good. Like I said, I wasn't quite yet sure to say I was an atheist, but I was definitely going to back away from this religion stuff. I didn't really like being dependent upon these pills, though. Because, well, for one, I had pretty good experience with doctors that didn't know what they were doing, and I kind of had this paranoia that, well, what if Some doctors say, well, you don't need this anymore. Or the doctor I went to quit, and I had to go to some other doctor who didn't know what to prescribe for me or wouldn't prescribe it for me. So I felt like I was dependent upon my drug pusher. So I really, really, really hated the idea of being dependent upon the medicine, but yet I knew I was. So this is like around 1984 or so. And the next few years, things are more or less status quo. I'm not thinking too much about religion. Maybe a little bit here and there, but like I said, I'm really not thinking much about it. I did still keep going to this singles group, the church, for many years now. I had a lot of good friends there. Never did do very good with the women there, but at least I had some friends there. So around end of 87 or so, a close friend of mine gave me a book called The 88 Reasons the Rapture Will Be in 1988, which was a book that predicted the so-called rapture would be on Rosh Hashanah 1988. And if you remember, I said that I had my first experience or first the concept was from my father when I was very young. So this idea of the rapture as being something that might really happen has been something in my mind for a long time. I had read Hal Lindsey's books, like I said. And like I said, I wasn't very good at critical thinking at the time. And, I read the book, and like I remember specifically, one of the specific arguments is that, well, God likes to do things with numerical significance, like 40 and 7. And in the Bible, there was the Israelis wandered the desert for 40 years. In 1988 was 40 years after the Reformation of Israel in 1948. So that was a direct parallel, or at least gave you the claim it was supposed to be a direct parallel. And he had many other similar numerical coincidences based upon 7 and 40. And, from my way of thinking at the time was, one or two of these could be just coincidence. But could there really be all these different things that all point to one year and have it just be coincidence, Of course, now I know that if you try real hard, you can always find numerical coincidences. But at the time, this seemed pretty powerful to me. I mean, I'm like, this is some pretty serious stuff. I need to really look into this. Like I said, I'd always been kind of paranoid about heaven and hell. And, some people even said things like that backslidden Christians would be treated even worse than like non-believers. And if I perhaps had been classified as a backslidden Christian because I've been doing this Christian prayer stuff, that maybe I'm now even in a worse condition than I ever was to begin with, which not fair, but that who knows? I mean, I don't know. All I know is I better figure out what I'm going to believe before this rapture comes, if it's going to come. So I'm treating this almost like a deadline, that this is my deadline to become a Christian. It's Rosh Hashanah 1988. So this is a deadline ahead of me. I start reading apologetics. I know I read Hal Lindsey's books, but I read Josh McDowell's More Than a Carpenter, Evidence Demands a Verdict. Don't remember who else I read, but I know I read those kinds of books at that time. And since I didn't know where to find counter arguments and didn't even think to look for counter arguments, these are sounding pretty persuasive to me. That they seem like strong arguments. But yet, I still don't know how to feel it. I mean, I tried the sinner's prayer again, and I still don't feel like I'm getting a real connection. And I know other people in church are telling me about how they feel so close to God. And so that's kind of telling me, well, maybe I'm still not a Christian yet, but I'm doing the best I can. Maybe I'm not sincere, but I'm trying to be as sincere as I can. I've got doubts, but I can't help it. Like I said, catch-22. I didn't know how to break this spiritual catch-22 that I was in. Now, I've talked with some of my friends about this book, and some of them are kind of, sympathetic and know some, have some thoughts about the rapture and kind of on my side. They, well, maybe this is really going to happen. On the other hand, other of my friends are saying, oh, come on, what a load of crap. You can't take that. They're kind of ridiculing me for even even thinking about this. So this is getting me self-conscious. And what am I supposed to do? How am I going to prove myself to God? Maybe I need to be giving this book out to all my friends and family and maybe that's what I'm going to need to do to prove to God that I'm sincere. But at the same time, I'm still hesitant because I'm embarrassed. I'm afraid that people are going to ridicule me. And yet I'm afraid that maybe that's why God is going to reject me, is because of the fact that I'm still embarrassed and afraid. I decided to go ahead and give my father a copy of the book. At least initially I did it anonymously. You see, like I said, my father was one of the first to introduce me to the concept of the rapture, but that was, by this time, years ago. And my father, at this point, seems to be even farther away from a Christian than he ever did. Because, at this time, he seems to almost never be talking about religion anymore. Maybe he's a backslidden Christian. Maybe he needs this. Maybe he's going to go to hell if he doesn't read this book. So, I don't know. And I give it to him anonymously because, I'm still a little bit self-conscious and afraid. But my father starts talking to me a little about, hey, I got this book that somebody left in my mailbox. I don't know who left it, but he tells me about, some of the interesting things about it. So I eventually go ahead and confess that it was from me. And he gets into it a little bit, not nearly as severely as I did, but he seems to have some interest and some thoughts about this. But he also seems to think that, well, if it happens, it happens. This is what God does. God's going to do what He's going to do. So he didn't have a overreaching, obsession with it like I did. So now, the day is approaching. The day is coming. I'm still not sure even what God is expecting of me. I'm still not feeling. Still not feeling that I really feel the religion, and not feeling God's love yet. Shall be going out the streets with signs. The end is near. Repent. The end is near. Shall be painting signs and walking the streets. What is God expecting of me? I don't know. But I'm still too afraid, too embarrassed to do so. So I decide, well, I'm just going to stay up all night. And there is some scripture that says, don't let this day catch you napping. Obviously, I knew that was figurative, but I was going to take it literally. I was going to stay up all night and wait for Jesus and read my Bible and pray and wait for Jesus to come. And, around 2 or 3 in the morning, I'm not sure what time it is. I get dizzy and the room starts to spin. And I wonder, is this it? Is this Jesus coming? Jesus, this is as serious as I know how to be. Take me if you're going to take me. Well, then I guess I'm just sleepy. I guess the room's just spinning. I guess the room isn't really spinning. I'm just sleepy. I guess Jesus isn't coming, at least not right now. At this point, I figure, well, I've given it the best I've got. Forget this staying up all night. I'm too tired. I'm going to bed. So I gave up on that idea of staying up all night. So I go to sleep around 2 or 3 in the morning. And wake up the next morning and, well, Jesus never came. Turn on the news and there's no weird news reports about people disappearing. I called the author's hotline, and the author has a little recording saying the author's in prayer and will release a statement as soon as he is able. So, deadline is over. Day came and went. So what does that mean to me? Does it mean I should just say, forget it? This religion thing didn't work for me yet again? Or maybe this is really God's test. Maybe He wants to know if I'll stay a Christian even after failed. Or maybe God wants to know, was I just in it for this deadline? Maybe God wants to know that this is the real test. And like I said, I'd read a lot of these apologetics, and I thought they sounded convincing. So I thought even if I didn't have an emotional feeling of Christianity as being true, I thought I had an intellectual belief that it was true. And I talked to, I had some other friends at church, and one of them was also an engineer, and I talked to him, about how I was feeling, and this is close to a direct quote, not as close as I can remember, that he said, "Glory bolts are for the emotionalists. You and me, we're the intellectualists. We don't get those glory bolts. Our path is just to convince ourselves of the truth of reality of God's existence, and that's all there is for us. I mean, there are no glory bolts." So I guess that's as good an answer as I'm going to come up with, because I can't figure anything else out. So I decide that I'm sticking with this. I'm going to stay a Christian. I'm not going to just be somebody who's just in it just because of this 88 reasons book. And so, for about the next 10 years or so, I continue going to church reasonably regularly, maybe not every week, but most weeks I go to church. But as the days and months and years pass by, the questions that I never really felt answered keep nagging at me. The problem of evil, and how could God create, a loving God create heaven and hell and send people to hell? And sure, I've heard the free will response to the problem of evil, and sure, I've heard the more modern takes on hell as just being a separation from God, that it's not a literal fire and brimstone. And I've heard those types of explanations, and they never seemed very convincing to me. And the more the days go by, the more these answers just don't seem to very believable to me. And I could feel that, my faith was eroding. It was something that I thought I wanted to keep. I didn't want to not be, I worked so hard to be as close to a Christian as I could be. I mean, I worked so hard. I didn't want to give this up. But these questions aren't being answered to my satisfaction. And I'm looking through apologetics on Amazon.com. This is around 99 or so. And I see this book by Lee Strobel, The Case for Faith. And it talks about these are the topics that he talks about. The problem of evil, heaven and hell, and similar types of suffering, and similar types of questions. And, part of me is kind of wondering, can this guy really have any new and different answers that I've already heard from other pastors and other apologists? I don't know. But, it's got all these great reviews. I mean, all these people are talking about how, man, Lee Strobel, man, he was a Chicago Times or whatever reporter, Chicago something or other, Tribune, I think, reporter, and that he was a former atheist, which I thought at the time that was something that was convincing to me. Now I know that every Christian was a former atheist, it seemed like. But at the time, that seemed like, pretty powerful stuff. He's a former atheist. And he's a reporter. I mean, he knows investigation. And the reviewers are saying that he doesn't take the easy answers. I mean, he's really puts the pedal to the metal, the nail, hammer the nail. And I mean, he's the man. Lee Strobel is the man. I mean, I'm not entirely sure I buy that, but seems like if any book is going to be able to answer my questions, it seems like this is the book I've got to get me in my hands on. I got to get me Lee Strobel's Case for Faith. That's the book I need. So I ordered up on Amazon.com. I ordered The Case for Faith, and I'm anxiously waiting for my book. Oh boy, it's here, the case for faith. My book's here. This is gonna hopefully rejuvenate my faith. The reason why I'm pointing this out is that I did not buy this book with as an atheist, expecting that it was going to be crap. I bought it hoping it was going to finally answer some of these questions I can't get answered. But as I read it, page after page, it's another page, another page. He can't be serious. These are the dumbest frickin' answers I've ever heard in my frickin' life. This is the stupidest crap I've ever heard. Now, maybe somebody else, there's yet one other author, maybe there's some other author that's really got the right answer. But it was like, this was like a gestalt, a moment for me where I said, the reason why I can't find answers to these questions is there are no answers to these questions. That was my final realization, that there are no answers to these questions. And so Lee Strobel's, ironically, his book, The Case for Faith, was supposed to help you keep your faith, and it was what shredded it to the last remaining bit, was shredded by that piece of crap, idiot, stupid book. So that's where my name, Case Against Faith, comes from. It's a play on the words of the Case for Faith title. Now, when my previous series of this came out, I talked about the 88 reasons, and I had some Christians comment on my previous video series saying something like, well, that's your problem. You put your faith in that man, that guy that wrote that book. You didn't get the point. No, that really wasn't only... That book really was not what killed my faith. I mean, I still tried hard after that book. I was still going to church for another 10 years after that. What really killed it was the final realization was that Christianity does not have the answers. Now, sure, it was a part. My depression and learning that, biochemical pharmaceutical compounds work a lot better than prayer. That was certainly a part. The fact that failed predictions by Mr. Rizadon, or whatever his name was, that was part of it, of course. But the real crux of the matter is that there are no answers to these questions. And the free will defense and the just don't make it. I'm not going to go into why I say that in this video, but let's just say for point of this video is that I'm convinced that those answers do not work and that there is no good answers to those questions. So no, it wasn't any one thing. It was a little bit of everything. But, well, now, even when I first finished reading The Case for Faith, and I knew that those were totally bad answers, like I said, I thought some of the other historical reasons and cosmological reasons and all that, cosmological argument, some of those other reasons I thought were still good reasons to believe in some sort of God. So even then, I really wasn't quite saying I was an atheist. I was maybe that there was still some higher power, maybe. But then it was at that point that I said, well, now I'm going to start learning a little bit about how to counter arguments, seeing what both sides, instead of just listening to one side. And that was kind of when I learned a little bit about skepticism. Is when he says, you're going to have to, you don't just read one side and think that that's giving you all the answers. So after that, that was when I started seeing, well, those other things that I thought were good reasons, those archaeological reasons, those are crap, those are garbage reasons. The cosmological argument is a garbage argument, it doesn't work. And so all those other things that I thought were good reasons to believe in at least some sort of God fell away pretty quickly. So it wasn't quite the case for faith that made me an atheist. It certainly made me a non-Christian. And then fairly quickly after, the other pillars that I thought proved something of, fell away pretty quickly thereafter. And so here I am today, case against faith, atheist. That's all I have to say for this video. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.